In this video, we're going to look at 6 creative builds from the MakerPipe community. These are all wildly different and they have different purposes, but they all share one thing in common, and that's the fact that they're built with off-the-shelf electrical EMT conduit and fittings for building with EMT conduit. And we're going to look at these projects and just going to highlight some different things and hopefully give you some inspiration for your own DIY builds with these materials. First up is this truck rack from Brian, and this is really cool. He built this rack and it mounts directly to the bed rails of his truck and just utilizes some of the MakerPipe fittings here. We can go ahead and kind of break this down. Essentially, he's got MakerPipe flanges that are bolting this frame directly to the bed rails of his truck. He's got 2 on each side, so 4 in total, as we can see there. And then he's got some short pieces of conduit mounted in there that go up a little bit, and then he's using the MakerPipe T-connector to grab on to those pieces of conduit, and then essentially just made a series of rectangles using some more MakerPipe fittings. So he's got the long horizontal pieces that go from one side to the other, one in the back, and then he's got the 2 pieces that kind of go between those 2 rectangles, and then he's got MakerPipe T-connectors grabbing on in the corners, and that's how he's attaching those. And then he used more MakerPipe T-connectors to add the crossbars that support the coolers there, as we can see, and then he's using more T-connectors grabbing on to those horizontal rails, and then those go up and then create another rectangle. And he's actually using some off-the-shelf 90-degree elbows to create the kind of front and back panel, and then he's using off-the-shelf hanger straps and then some off-the-shelf chain to add this, kind of tie-down mechanism. See more T-connectors in there. Looks like a thing to kind of capture the cooler in place to keep it from sliding all over the place. And it's a pretty simple rack overall. Just a lot of MakerPipe T-connectors and just some cool ideas in there. Of course, when you're building something like this, we want you to be safe and make sure it's not going to, fall off, or everything's going to be secure whenever you're going down the highway. So definitely keep that in mind whenever you're building something like this. But this is a really great idea, and I didn't mention it, but you don't have to weld when you use EMT conduit and MakerPipe, and that allows you to build awesome things like this without having to do any welding, just using simple hand tools, and you can make custom things. So really cool. Thanks so much, Brian, for sharing this awesome build. Next up is a shade structure that was shared by Tula, and this is really cool. It's a nice and simple shade structure, as we can see here, and it's made to mount, as you can see, it really doesn't mount to the wall or anything. It's just kind of sitting freestanding out there in their yard. And we can see here, I would imagine they're probably using the solution where you hammer some rebar in the ground and slide the EMT conduit over top of it. And then it's just a 3/4 inch EMT conduit vertical going up to the top there. And then they use something really cool, which is the off-the-shelf 90-degree bent elbow that you can buy. And then they use some off-the-shelf electrical couplings to join that bent elbow to the other pieces of conduit in their frame. And essentially just have this, the 2 verticals, 1 on each side, the elbows in the corners for that nice rounded edge, and then they use some MakerPipe 45-degree connectors to add this bracing. And then we can see here that they kind of spray painted the whole thing to match and kind of fit the landscape and the colors here of their, looks like a tiny home maybe, which is really cool because they have this nice and small patio, and then they added some shade. But essentially, this is just mounted here, and then they have their shade cloth. It's not really, I guess it's just kind of tied off here. So it's attached to the house, and then it's just, attached with some rope to the vertical on each side. And it doesn't look very heavy, and really isn't adding a lot of tension to the frame, because if it was, it would eventually pull that over, especially with the rebar stakes being the only thing holding that up. They might have it tied off somewhere else too, like a cable or rope or something, pulling it towards, like, away from the house, pulling the frame away from the house. We don't really see that here, but could be doing something like that, to keep it from tipping over, with wind and whatnot. But it's a really great build. You can see some MakerPipe couplings in there to kind of extend the horizontal span. They've got some wind chimes and some baskets hanging off of this, and just a really simple project, but a great way to add some shade to this small patio area. So really cool. Thanks so much for sharing this with us. Next up is a really cool arbor that Jenny shared with us, and this is really awesome because oftentimes we see frames as soon as they're finished and we don't get a follow-up and we don't get to see them when they actually have plants on them. But here, Jenny shared this photo. We can see that she built this trellis for her cucumbers over top of her walkway. Got some chickens down there too. But essentially, you can see, some pieces of the MakerPipe frame kind of showing there through the vines and whatnot. but essentially just the rectangular trellis that extends up and then over the walkway and then down the other side. See some MakerPipe 90-degree connectors in there for the corners. See some T connectors, adding some cross supports. And this thing is really loaded down, and it looks like it's holding up well. The whole frame, the whole metal steel frame is holding up. Don't really see it bending or flexing anywhere, which is awesome. And we don't see exactly what is attached to this. I think it looks like cattle panels, because that's a common thing we see from gardeners in the community. They'll build their steel frame and then add some steel cattle panels to it. And that's what allows plants to climb up and over. But this is really fantastic, and just a really great trellis and a great example of EMT conduit and connectors being used for a really modular project in the garden, because she said that she needed this. She needed some more support for her plants, but didn't want to really add a big structure to her garden. So this just kind of utilizes the space over the walkway that really wouldn't be used anyway, and just adds that trellis for the plants. So really awesome job. Looks fantastic, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. Next up is a really cool trailer rack that was shared by JD. And this is really fantastic. Essentially, it looks like just a utility trailer. It's made of metal, and pretty much just built a 3/4 inch conduit frame to go over top of the bed and not take up any space in the bed, and then that allows them to store even more stuff up here on top. And we can see here it's your pretty standard rectangular frame with 90-degree connectors in the corners, as we can see there, and then they've got pretty much 3 of those in each corner, so some back here and then all the way around, pretty much to make this rectangular frame. And then it looks like a ton of T connectors. You can see going all the way down this with a ton of cross supports, and that's just going to make it easy to put storage bins or whatever it is that they're hauling up there in there. And then they've got all those railings going around to keep those from sliding out, so that's really cool. We can see some angled bracing with 45-degree connectors, and we can see some horizontal support on the side with T connectors with this vertical support attached to it. So a ton of connectors in this, but really cool. And it looks like this trailer is actually made to have a rack installed in it, because if we look on this other side, we can see where the vertical is going through the bed rail and then has a bolt going through the side of the trailer, and essentially goes down into here. So it looks like kind of fits in this slot perfectly, and then has bolts going through the side of the trailer and through the conduit to hold it in place. So that's really cool, and looks like a great way to secure that in there. Like I said, of course, with these kind of builds, we want you to be safe and make sure it's not going to fall off or rattle loose or anything like that. And that is something that customers have asked us a lot, and we've had a lot of people build roof racks over the years, and we've heard great feedback, and people say that they've traveled across the country and back and then haven't had any single connectors vibrate loose. We think that's because of the design of the connector, where they kind of clamp around, and the tension of the force of the connector trying to open back up because of the way they're designed, we think serves as kind of like a lock nut to keep the connector from vibrating loose. So that's something to keep in mind if you're wanting to build something like this. And this is just really cool. So thanks so much, JD, for sharing this. Hopefully it's working out great for you. Next up is another trellis, and this was shared by Tim. This is really cool. We can see here they've got a wooden raised garden bed, and essentially just built a 2-tiered trellis that extends up and is supporting their tomato plants, as we can see here. And it looks like it's doing a great job. The tomato plants are thriving. There's a ton of tomatoes on there. Essentially, it looks like just kind of a main rectangular frame that we see with 90-degree connectors in the corners. And then a few feet down the horizontal pipe, they added a T connector to go up and create this other rectangle that extends up, and then just kind of adds another layer on top of this. And it's kind of the same height as their deck railing, which is really cool. They might be able to lean over and actually pick tomatoes from their deck, which would be awesome. But it's really cool. We don't really have any other photos, but we can see in this one that it's doing great, and it's not too complicated of a frame. I think it's just a bunch of 90-degree connectors just to make the cubes. And I also see some 45-degree connectors to make that angled support, just to add that crotch support to the side, because we know that tomatoes can get really heavy. So that's definitely something you want to consider adding if you're going to be building something like this. So that's really awesome. Thanks so much, Tim, for sharing this. Last but not least is a chicken coop or chicken tractor that was shared by Michael. This is fantastic. It's pretty much a 3 compartment design, as we can see, and they pretty much just made it into several panels that they could take apart really easily. And it looks like just your standard steel rectangular panel that we see with T connectors in the corners to make a 2-dimensional square or rectangle. And they've got some chicken fencing secured to the outside. They've also got some plywood secured to some of the panels. We can see some hinges in there to actually make these panels so they can fold up, which is really cool. And then here we can see it in place. So they've got a plywood wall. They've got the hinging panel panel up here so they can open the top of it. We can see some other hinges and things. I don't entirely know. Oh, actually, those are the clamps that we've talked about on the channel before. They're hose clamps for like engine bays, but they work really well for securing to EMT conduit if you get the right size. I'll link that video that talks more about that down below so you can check it out. But essentially, they just built all these panels separately and then use those clamps to secure everything in place. And it makes it really easy to tear this down if you need to, for storage, or once you get new chickens and need to put them in there. But then here we can see it all in place with chickens in there. They got chicken feeders. There's a tarp over the top just to give them some shade, and just looks really awesome. Really great job. And we can see they actually added a panel in between each compartment, which is awesome, and just looks really good. So just another awesome chicken enclosure from the community. We always love seeing the different projects and the different ways that you guys are using EMT conduit and connectors for your custom projects. Hopefully this gave you some ideas for things you can incorporate into your next build. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.